Marcus Ellison was 44 years old, earned $72,000 a year as a senior HVAC technician, and was, at this precise moment, an invisible man. The devastating situation wasn't new, it was a tradition, polished by 12 years of practice. It was 3:14 p.m. on a sweltering Saturday in August at his in-laws' annual garden party. The Carter family estate in Buckhead, a sprawling mansion of white columns and manicured lawns, was a world away from the modest three-bedroom house in Decatur that Marcus's salary paid for. He stood near a meticulously trimmed boxwood hedge, the fabric of his simple $120 polo shirt sticking to his back. His wife, Renee, was across the lawn, a vision in a flowing canary yellow sundress that probably cost $500. Her laughter, light and musical, carried on the thick, humid air as she mingled with her parents and their wealthy friends. No one looked at Marcus. No one had spoken to him for 47 minutes, not since Renee's uncle, a man named Robert with a booming voice and a condescending smile, had clapped him on the shoulder and said, "Hey, Mark, be a good lad and see if the caterers need a hand with the ice, will you?" Marcus had nodded, his face a neutral mask, and walked toward the catering tent. He hadn't been needed. He never was. Now he watched as Renee's father, William Carter, a formidable man with a crown of silver hair and skin the color of rich mahogany, held court. He was telling a story about his last trip to Europe, gesturing with a hand that wore a gold watch easily worth $10,000. Marcus glanced at his own watch, a practical and durable $89 Timex he'd owned for 6 years. The contrast wasn't just in their timepieces, it was in their very existence. The Carters inhabited a world of effortless luxury, a world built on a foundation Marcus was beginning to suspect he was unknowingly supporting. He felt a familiar, dull ache in his chest, the pain of being perpetually on the outside of his own life. He was a ghost at the feast, a silent benefactor whose presence was tolerated only as a matter of familial obligation, and even then, just barely. He had no idea how profoundly that foundation was about to crack, or that he would be the one to finally take a sledgehammer to it. Have you ever felt invisible in your own life? Let us know in the comments below and stick with us to see how one man found his voice after 12 years of silence. The early days with Renee had been different. He'd met her at a friend's barbecue 12 years ago. She was vibrant and smart, working in marketing for a downtown firm. Her smile could light up a room, and when she looked at him, he felt seen. He was a younger man then, just starting to build his reputation as a reliable HVAC tech. His hands were calloused, his work truck wasn't new, but he had a quiet confidence and a steady heart. She said she loved that about him. She said his stability was a comfort. Their first home was a small rental, but he filled it with love, and secondhand furniture he repaired himself. He'd cook for her after a long day, his broad shoulders hunched over the stove, carefully preparing her favorite meal. They'd talk for hours. Her family, the Carters, were a distant, gilded concept she spoke of with a mixture of pride and exasperation. "They're a lot," she'd warned him before he first met them. "But they mean well." He had no idea how wrong she was. The first meeting was at the same Buckhead estate for Christmas. He'd worn his best suit, a modest but well-fitting piece that cost him $200. He brought a bottle of $75 aged whiskey for her father. William Carter had accepted the gift with a cursory nod, setting it on a side table where it was immediately lost among dozens of others. Throughout the evening, they asked him polite but pointed questions. "HVAC, you say? So, you work with your hands?" Her mother, Eleanor, had asked, her tone making it sound like an unfortunate diagnosis. How quaint. Renee had squeezed his hand under the table, a silent apology. At the time, he'd accepted it as solidarity. He told himself it was just a cultural gap. He was a working man. They were something else. But the pattern began to set. At every family function, there was a subtle but clear line drawn between him and them. He was introduced with a slight hesitation. "This is Renee's husband, Marcus." His profession was either mumbled or omitted entirely. When they bought their house in Decatur, a solid, respectable home for $350,000, it was Marcus's savings that provided the $70,000 down payment. His steady income was what secured the mortgage. The monthly payment of $2,180 came directly from his bank account. Renee had stopped working a year after their daughter Maya was born. "The commute is just too much, and the daycare costs are astronomical," she had reasoned. "With your salary, we can manage just fine." Marcus, wanting to provide for his family, had agreed. He took on extra weekend jobs, his body aching after long weeks in scorching attics and cramped crawl spaces. To make sure they never felt a pinch, he built a life for them. He packed Maya's lunch every morning, carefully cutting the crusts off her sandwiches just the way she liked. He'd braid her hair, his large, gentle fingers working through her beautiful, tight coils, adding the colorful beads that would click and dance when she ran. He fixed the leaky faucet, patched the drywall, and taught Maya how to ride her bike in the park down the street. Their home was filled with the scent of his cooking and the sound of his daughter's laughter. But that life seemed to exist in a bubble, separate from the world of the Carters. When Renee's family was involved, Marcus's role shifted. The money he earned, however, was always welcome. "Mom needs a new dishwasher. The old one is making a racket," Renee would say, scrolling through her phone. "I saw a great Bosch model for $1,200. He'd sigh and transfer the money. "My brother, Kevin, is trying to start a new business venture. He just needs a little seed money, maybe $5,000? She'd ask, framing it as an investment in family. Marcus, wanting to be a supportive husband, would agree. The checks were cashed, the money was spent, and at the next family gathering, Kevin would barely make eye contact with him. The domestic normalcy of his life in Decatur was a stark contrast to the performative grandeur of Buckhead. He'd come home, covered in dust and sweat, to find Renee dressed for an evening out with her sister. "Just a little charity thing," she'd say, slipping on a pair of $800 Jimmy Choo heels. "Don't wait up." He'd spend the evening with Maya, reading her stories. The quiet intimacy of their time together, a balm on his weary soul. He was a father and a husband, a provider and a caregiver. But in the eyes of his wife's family, he was little more than a walking, breathing ATM, a functional accessory to their daughter's life, easily set aside when not immediately useful. And for 12 years, he had quietly accepted this role, believing it was the price of peace. The insults accumulated like rust, slowly, almost imperceptibly at first, then corrupting everything. What began as subtle condescension hardened over the years into overt, casual cruelty. The outrage was a slow-burning fire in Marcus's gut, one he had learned to smother for the sake of a quiet life. There was the Christmas, 7 years into the marriage, that crystallized his status. The Carter dining room was a spectacle of mahogany and crystal. A massive 20-foot table was set for 30 people. As guests found their place cards, Marcus searched for his own. He found it, not at the main table, but at a small, round table in the corner, next to the swinging door to the kitchen. He was seated with 2 distant cousins and a teenager who spent the entire meal on his phone. When he caught Renee's eye, she gave a little shrug, mouthing the words, "We just needed more room." Later, during the gift exchange, Marcus presented his father-in-law with a beautiful, handcrafted wooden box containing a set of high-end German chisels, a gift that had cost him $250 and weeks of research. William opened it, glanced at the contents, and said, "Ah, tools. Thank you, Marcus." He set it aside without a second look. 5 minutes later, he handed Renee's brother, Kevin, an envelope. "Just to help you get that new condo squared away," William announced. Kevin opened it and beamed. It was a check for $20,000. The room erupted in applause. Marcus felt the air leave his lungs. The cruelty wasn't always financial. It was in the constant erasure of his presence. At Maya's 9th birthday party, hosted in their own backyard in Decatur, the Carters arrived an hour late. They swept in, bearing a gift that was both ostentatious and passive-aggressive, a 6-foot-tall, fully furnished dollhouse that cost at least $1,500. It completely overshadowed the custom-built bicycle Marcus had spent a month assembling and painting in Maya's favorite colors. His daughter, bless her innocent heart, was thrilled by the dollhouse, but Marcus saw the gift for what it was: a declaration of territory, a reminder of who held the real power, even in his own home. Throughout the party, his in-laws spoke over him, answered questions directed at him, and steered every conversation back to their own lives, their own friends, their own world. He was a silent host in his own backyard. The breaking point, the moment the smothering blanket he'd wrapped around his anger was finally burned away, came on a Tuesday night. It was late, close to 11. Maya was asleep. Marcus had just finished cleaning the kitchen after a long day. Renee was in their bedroom, getting ready for bed. He walked in, the exhaustion of his day compounded by a deep, simmering resentment. Her brother had called earlier, asking for another loan, this time for a can't-miss stock tip. Renee had already agreed to it on their behalf. "We need to talk about Kevin," Marcus began, his voice low and even. Renee sighed, not looking up from the $90 night cream she was applying to her face. "What about him?" "This is the 3rd time this year he's asked for money, Renee. He never pays it back. We're not a bank. He's my brother, Marcus. Family helps family. It's what we do." Her tone was dismissive, as if he were a child complaining about something trivial. "Is it?" he pressed, the heat rising in his chest. "Because I'm your family too? And your family has never once treated me like it. They talk down to me, they ignore me, they seat me at a card table at Christmas, like I'm a hired hand. And you just stand there and let them." Renee finally turned to look at him, her expression hardening. Her beautiful face, the face he had fallen in love with, became a mask of cold annoyance. "Oh, here we go again. You are so sensitive about this. They're just old-fashioned. That's how they are. It's not a big deal." "It is a big deal." His voice was louder now, cracking with the weight of a decade of slights. "It's my life. It's my dignity. They treat me like I'm nothing. And you, my wife, you co-sign it with your silence." She stood up, her silk robe falling perfectly around her. She walked towards him, stopping just a foot away. Her eyes, which once held such warmth, were now chips of ice. She looked him up and down, a slow, deliberate appraisal that made him feel small, insignificant. Then she delivered the line that would echo in his mind for months, the words that severed the last thread of hope he had for their marriage. "Honestly," she said, her voice dropping to a confidential, cruel whisper, "you're so dramatic. It's not that hard. You're easy to ignore when you don't matter." The words landed like physical blows. He felt the blood drain from his face. He had no response. There was nothing to say to a truth that absolute, that devastating. He saw in her eyes that she meant it. He didn't matter. His feelings, his dignity, his presence, they were all irrelevant noise in the grand symphony of her life with her family. He was just the man who paid for the instruments. He turned without another word and walked out of the room. He went downstairs and sat in the dark living room, the one he had painted, in the house he paid for, and felt a cold, terrifying clarity. The peace he thought he was keeping was a lie. He hadn't been keeping the peace. He had been sacrificing his soul. And for what? For a woman who found him easy to ignore. The fire in his gut was no longer smoldering. It was a controlled, white-hot flame, demanding an accounting. He didn't know how yet, but he knew, with chilling certainty, that things were about to change. He would make them matter. The discovery happened on Saturday, April 15th, a day Marcus would later remember as the true end of his marriage. The federal tax deadline was breathing down his neck. It was 11:32 p.m. Maya was asleep upstairs, her quiet breathing a comforting rhythm in the silent house. Renee was out, at a gala, for a charity he'd never heard of, wearing a new $2,400 Burberry dress he'd only found out about when he saw the credit card statement. He was at the small oak table in their kitchen, the one he'd bought for $300 from a consignment shop and refinished himself. The air was cool, scented with the lingering aroma of the spaghetti he'd made for himself and Maya for dinner. A single lamp cast a pool of warm light over a mountain of paperwork. Bank statements, credit card bills, receipts he'd shoved into a shoebox over the course of the year. He was hunting for a specific receipt for a new set of manifold gauges. A deductible work expense. His fingers, thick and calloused from years of gripping wrenches and hoisting compressors, sifted through the slips of paper. He was tired. His back ached from a difficult installation in a cramped attic that afternoon. He just wanted to find the receipt and go to bed. He opened the statement for their joint checking account, the account his $72,000 salary was deposited into every 2 weeks. Renee's occasional freelance graphic design work, which brought in perhaps $5,000 a year, also went into that account. He scanned the columns, his eyes blurring slightly. Direct deposit, Marcus Ellison, plus $2,769.23. Mortgage payment, minus $2,180. City of Decatur. Water, minus $112.50. Then he saw it. A charge from Exquisite Tastes Catering. The amount was $4,500. He frowned. They hadn't used a caterer? Then it hit him. The date on the transaction was August 22nd of last year, 2 days after the Carters' annual garden party. The party where Uncle Robert had asked him to go check on the ice. A cold feeling, sharp and unpleasant, pricked at the base of his neck. He remembered Renee saying her mother was handling the arrangements. He had assumed William and Eleanor were paying. He had never, not once, considered that he was funding his own humiliation. His heart started to beat a little faster. He put the catering receipt aside and kept scrolling through the statement. Another charge caught his eye. A transfer of $5,000 to Kevin Carter. The memo line written by Renee read, "Business loan." This was the can't-miss stock tip that had started the final devastating fight. He had told her no, but she had done it anyway. From their joint account, from his money. The room suddenly felt very cold. The gentle hum of the $1,800 Samsung refrigerator beside him seemed to grow louder, filling the silence. He pushed back from the table and went to the hall closet where they kept old records. He pulled out box after box of old bank statements going back to the first year of their marriage. For the next 3 hours, Marcus sat at that kitchen table and excavated the financial history of his life. He laid the statements out in chronological order. The kitchen floor became a timeline of his own deception. He saw a payment of $7,800 to the Fulton County Tax Commissioner. He cross-referenced the property ID online. It wasn't for their house in Decatur. It was the property tax bill for his in-laws' guest house in Buckhead. He'd been paying it for 6 years. He saw the down payment assistance he'd given them for Renee's sister's first car, a $43,000 white BMW 3 Series. They'd called it a family gift. The transfer was for $10,000 from his account. He saw charges for vacations he wasn't invited on, tuition for a sommelier course for Kevin, and thousands upon thousands of dollars spent at high-end department stores. He felt a tremor in his hand as he opened his laptop and created a new spreadsheet. The screen's cold, blue-white light illuminated his face, showing the deep lines of disbelief and a dawning, terrible rage. He began to type, his fingers moving with a grim precision. Column A, date. Column B, description. Column C, amount. Column D, beneficiary. June 2012, Carter Family Reunion Catering, $2,150. The Carters. March 2014, down payment, Kevin Carter's condo, $15,000. Kevin Carter. September 2016, property tax, Buckhead Guest House, $7,200. William and Eleanor Carter. And on it went. The numbers piled up, each one a small betrayal, a single brick in a massive wall of disrespect he had been too blind to see. The total at the bottom of the spreadsheet grew, a monstrous, glowing figure on the screen. By 4 a.m., as the first hints of dawn touched the sky, he was finished. He stared at the final number. $482,115, almost $500,000, siphoned away. Given freely by his wife, earned by the sweat of his brow. He didn't feel anger anymore. That was too hot, too simple an emotion. What he felt was a profound, chilling emptiness. The love he thought he had, the family he thought he was part of, it was all a transaction, and he had been on the losing end for 12 years. He leaned back in his chair, the papers spread around him like wreckage, and for the first time he saw the full, unvarnished truth of his marriage. It was a business arrangement, and his contract was up for renewal. He closed the laptop. It was time to renegotiate the terms. On Monday morning at 9:05 a.m., Marcus walked into the law offices of James & Associates. It wasn't in one of the gleaming glass towers of Midtown that the Carters favored for their financial advisors. It was a modest, 3-story brick building in a quieter part of downtown, the kind of place that signaled competence over flash. He had found Alana James online, drawn to her biography, a sharp, focused black woman who specialized in family law and financial disputes. He was shown into her office. It was neat and organized, with shelves of law books and a single, vibrant painting of a jazz trio on the wall. Alana James stood to greet him. She was in her late 40s, with her natural hair styled in elegant silver-streaked twists. She wore a simple but powerful navy blue suit that probably cost more than his own, but it projected authority, not frivolity. Her handshake was firm. "Mr. Ellison," she said, her voice calm and professional, "please have a seat. My assistant said your matter was urgent." Her fee, he knew from their brief phone call, was $450 per hour. Marcus sat, placing his worn leather briefcase on his lap. He felt out of place, a man more comfortable with schematics and ductwork than legal consultations. He took a deep breath. "Thank you for seeing me, Mrs. James. I have a situation." He opened the briefcase and took out a single folder. Inside was the spreadsheet he had created, printed out and neatly organized. He also had a dozen sample bank statements with the relevant charges highlighted. He slid the folder across her polished desk. She opened it and began to read. Marcus watched her face, expecting a dramatic reaction, but her expression remained neutral, her eyes scanning the pages with intense focus. She was silent for a long time, the only sound in the room the quiet rustle of paper, as she turned from the spreadsheet to the statements, cross-referencing his work. He saw her eyebrows raise slightly once, then twice. A muscle in her jaw tightened. After nearly 20 minutes of silent reading, she finally looked up at him. The professional neutrality was gone, replaced by a look of hard, cold anger on his behalf. "Mr. Ellison," she said, her voice low and tight, "for 12 years, you have not been a husband. You have been an unacknowledged small business loan institution with exceptionally generous terms." The validation in her words was so powerful, it almost brought him to his knees. He just nodded, unable to speak. "This is egregious," she continued, tapping a perfectly manicured finger on the grand total at the bottom of his spreadsheet. "This is a systematic, long-term financial exploitation, veiled as family dynamics. The fact that your wife facilitated it makes it a profound marital breach." She leaned forward. "So, the question is, what do you want to do about it? We can file for divorce immediately. We can sue for misappropriation of marital assets. There are several paths we can take." Marcus finally found his voice. "I don't want a messy public fight, not yet. I have a daughter, Maya. She's 10. I need to protect her from all of this." He paused, gathering his thoughts. "For 12 years, they've made me feel worthless. They've taken my money and they've laughed at me. I just want an accounting. I want them to see it, all of it. I want to say it out loud, just once." Alana James studied him for a moment, then a slow, shrewd smile touched her lips. "An audit," she said, echoing the word he had used in his own mind. "I like that. It's clean. It's about facts, not feelings. It's not revenge, Mr. Ellison. It's accountability." For the next hour, she laid out a precise, methodical plan. First, he was to open a new bank account at a different bank, in his name only. He was to redirect his direct deposit there immediately. Second, he was to continue gathering evidence, every receipt, every statement. He was to create a comprehensive binder, a ledger, detailing every single transaction that benefited the Carters. She told him to scan every document, creating a digital backup stored on a secure cloud server. "You will go home and you will act as if nothing has changed," she instructed, her voice firm. "You will be the same quiet, agreeable man they think you are. Do not let your wife know you have seen a lawyer. Do not let her know you know anything. Your silence is now your most powerful weapon. We will choose the time and place for your audit. It needs to be a moment of maximum impact, a moment they cannot ignore or dismiss." He left her office an hour later, the $450 charge for the consultation, feeling like the best money he had ever spent. He had a plan. He had an ally. For the first time in over a decade, he wasn't just enduring, he was preparing. He spent his lunch break at a new bank, opening an account. That evening, after Maya was in bed, he began his work. He bought a thick, leather-bound $40 ledger and a high-quality scanner. Night after night, in the quiet darkness of his home, he meticulously documented his own betrayal. The soft whir of the scanner, a quiet promise of the reckoning to come. The 2 months that followed were the hardest of Marcus's life. He was living a double life, playing the part of the docile, oblivious husband, while a cold, methodical fury simmered just beneath the surface. Every interaction with Renee was a performance, every polite nod a lie. The strain was immense, a constant pressure behind his eyes. One evening, Renee came home, her arms full of shopping bags from Phipps Plaza, the most expensive mall in Atlanta. She pirouetted in the living room, showing off a new silk blouse. "What do you think?" she asked, beaming. "It's from Versace. It was on sale, practically a steal at $700. A year ago, he would have felt a spike of anxiety about the cost. Now he felt nothing but a cold, distant observation. He looked at the blouse, then at her, and gave the expected response. "It looks great on you, honey." Inside, he was making a mental note. Date, purchase, Versace, $700, source, joint account. That night, after she was asleep, he added the line item to his spreadsheet and scanned the receipt he'd found in her purse. The lie was one more piece of evidence. Her mother, Eleanor, called him directly a few weeks later. Her voice was syrupy sweet, the false warmth grating on his nerves. "Marcus, darling," she began, "we finally set the date for our 40th anniversary party. It's going to be at the estate, of course, a proper black tie affair." She paused for effect. "Renee mentioned that you'd be happy to cover the catering costs again this year. It's just such a tremendous help, and it allows us to really make it a special night." He felt the words like swallowing glass. He wanted to tell her to go to hell. He wanted to ask her how it felt to be so shamelessly parasitic. Instead, he took a deep breath, picturing Alana James's calm, steady face. "Your silence is your weapon." "Of course, Eleanor," he said, his voice a perfect imitation of his old, agreeable self. "Whatever Renee thinks is best, we want to make sure you and William have a wonderful celebration." "Oh, you are just the best son-in-law a mother could ask for," she gushed. "Truly." He hung up the phone, his hand trembling slightly. He walked to the kitchen and poured a glass of water, his reflection in the dark window showing a stranger's face, tight and grim. He was becoming an excellent liar. The thought brought him no comfort. The most difficult moments were with Maya. His daughter was perceptive, her young heart attuned to the subtle shifts in the emotional atmosphere of their home. One Saturday afternoon, he was sitting with her at the kitchen table, helping her with a school project on the solar system. She was meticulously coloring in the rings of Saturn, her brow furrowed in concentration, the colorful beads in her braids making a soft, clicking sound as she moved her head. Across the room, Renee was on a FaceTime call with her sister, their laughter loud and sharp. They were planning a spa weekend in Napa Valley, debating which five-star resort had the better mud baths. "The auberge is divine, but the Calistoga Ranch has those private lodges," her sister said, her voice tinny through the phone's speaker. A week there would be heaven. Marcus kept his focus on Maya, pointing to her drawing. "That looks amazing, sweetie. You're getting the colors just right." But he felt Maya's gaze on him. He looked up and saw her watching him, her big brown eyes filled with a quiet, knowing sadness. She had stopped coloring. "Daddy," she whispered, her voice so soft he could barely hear it over her mother's call. "Are you okay? Your smile doesn't reach your eyes anymore." The innocent, devastatingly accurate observation struck him like a physical blow. He felt his carefully constructed facade crack. He reached out and smoothed her hair, his thumb stroking her temple. He forced the smile to feel real, for her sake. "I'm okay, baby girl," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "I'm just a little tired from work, but helping you with Saturn is the best part of my day." She seemed to accept the answer, turning back to her drawing, but the moment lingered in the air between them. He was lying to his daughter, and he hated it. He hated the duplicity that had been forced upon him. This charade was costing him piece by piece. It was hollowing him out from the inside. He looked over at his wife, still laughing, still planning a trip on his dime, completely oblivious. He had made a critical mistake for 12 years, believing that his silence would buy him peace. He now knew it had only bought his erasure. The anniversary party was in 3 weeks. The performance was almost over. The audit was coming. The evening of William and Eleanor Carter's 40th anniversary party arrived on a perfect Saturday in late June. The sky over Buckhead was a brilliant canvas of orange and purple as the sun began to set. At the Carter estate, everything was flawless. White tents graced the vast back lawn, hundreds of tiny string lights twinkled like captive stars, and the gentle, sophisticated melody of a live string quartet drifted through the warm air. Around 50 guests, the cream of Black Atlanta society, mingled on the grass, sipping champagne and laughing. Marcus stood a little apart from the crowd, a silent observer in a simple, well-pressed $300 black suit. He held a single glass of sparkling water, the ice cubes clinking softly. He had driven separately. Renee had been furious. "What do you mean you're meeting me there? We're the hosts. We have to arrive together," she'd hissed as she was getting ready, adjusting the straps of her glittering silver $3,500 gown. "I have to check on a job site first. An emergency call. I won't be late," he had lied, his voice calm and even. He needed the space. He needed to arrive on his own terms. Beside him, on the passenger seat of his 2012 Toyota Camry with 187,000 miles, sat a handsome, leather-bound ledger. He watched Renee glide through the party, a perfect hostess, her laughter echoing. She was in her element, surrounded by the wealth and status she craved. She didn't look for him. She didn't need to. He was in his designated place, the background. At 8 p.m., after the main course had been served, William Carter, looking regal in a custom-tailored tuxedo, stood and tapped a spoon against his crystal glass. The crowd quieted. He beamed, his arm around his wife, Eleanor, who was radiant in an $8,700 Armani suit. "My friends, my family," William began, his voice rich and resonant. "Thank you all for being here to celebrate 40 years with my beautiful bride. 40 years of love, of family, of building a legacy." He spoke for several minutes, thanking his children, his business partners, his friends. Then he paused, a twinkle in his eye. He was about to make a joke, a familiar one. "And of course," he said, scanning the crowd with a theatrical air, "I have to give a special thanks to, Mark." He feigned forgetting Marcus's name, a bit he'd been doing for years. A few people tittered. "For making sure all the cars were parked properly and the champagne kept flowing. It's so good to have helpful people in the family." A wave of polite, cruel laughter rippled through the guests. It was the final nail. Marcus looked at Renee. She was smiling, a tight, thin smile of tacit approval. She caught his eye for a fraction of a second, her expression unchanged before turning back to her father. In that moment, something inside Marcus settled. The anger, the years of resentment, the tension. It all coalesced into a single point of cold, hard clarity. This was the moment. He set his glass down on a nearby table. He walked from the edge of the crowd toward the small raised platform where William stood. He moved with a quiet purpose that drew curious glances. As he approached, he reached into the inside pocket of his suit jacket and pulled out the leather-bound ledger. The string quartet had just finished a piece, and in the ensuing silence, Marcus stepped up onto the platform, taking the microphone from a surprised William Carter. The entire party, all 50 guests, turned to look at him. A confused murmur spread through the crowd. "Good evening," Marcus said, his voice steady and clear, amplified by the sound system. It was a voice no one there had ever truly heard before. It held no tremor, no anger, only an unshakable calm. "My name is Marcus Ellison. For those of you who may not know me, I have been Renee's husband for the past 12 years. He opened the ledger. The pages lay flat, filled with his neat, precise handwriting. "William, you mentioned thanking me for my help," he continued, his eyes finding his father-in-law in the crowd. "I appreciate that, but I believe there has been a significant and long-standing misunderstanding about the nature of my contributions to this family. So tonight, in the spirit of celebrating 40 years of the Carter legacy, I'd like to offer a different kind of toast, a financial review, an audit." A stunned silence fell over the party. The air grew thick with tension. Renee's face, which had been smiling a moment before, was now a frozen mask of disbelief. Marcus looked down at the first page of his ledger. "Page 1, he read, his voice resonating through the still night air. June 14th, 2012, contribution to Carter Family Reunion Catering, $2,150. Source: Ellison Primary Checking Account." He turned the page. Page 2, March 3rd, 2014. Down payment assistance for the condominium of Kevin Carter, $15,000. Source: Ellison Savings Account. He didn't raise his voice. He simply read the facts, one by one. The room was so quiet he could hear the faint rustle of the leaves in the trees. He read the dates and the amounts for the property taxes on the Buckhead guest house, year after year. He read the $10,000 payment for Renee's sister's BMW. He read the $25,000 business loan to Kevin that was never repaid. He detailed the cost of vacations, designer clothes, home renovations for their relatives, all paid for from an account funded almost exclusively by his labor. With each entry, a new layer of the Carter family's glittering facade was stripped away. William Carter's face had gone from confusion to fury to a pale, slack-jawed shock. Eleanor looked as if she might collapse, her hand clutching her chest. Renee was staring at him, her eyes wide with a mixture of horror and murderous rage. Her perfect party, her perfect world, was being dismantled, line by line, in front of everyone she wanted to impress. Finally, Marcus reached the last page. The itemized list spans 12 years and totals $482,115, he announced, his voice unwavering. He closed the ledger with a soft, final thud. He looked out at the sea of stunned faces, then his eyes settled on Renee. "For 12 years, he said, his voice dropping slightly but still carrying across the lawn, I have been seated at side tables. I have been called the help. I have been treated as an afterthought. My wife once told me, in a moment of profound honesty, you're easy to ignore when you don't matter. And I see now that she was half right. I didn't matter. But my money clearly did." He placed the ledger on the podium. "So as of tonight, June 24th at 8:17 p.m., this financial arrangement is terminated. The bank is closed. The help, as you so fondly call me, quits." He turned to step off the platform. The silence was absolute, a heavy, suffocating blanket. Then Renee found her voice, a venomous hiss that cut through the quiet. "Marcus, you sit down right now. You are embarrassing me." He didn't turn around. He didn't even hesitate. He stepped off the platform and began to walk across the perfectly manicured lawn, away from the white tents, away from the string quartet, away from 12 years of humiliation. He had taken maybe 10 steps when he heard a small sound behind him, a sound that cut through his own resolve. "Daddy?" He stopped and turned. It was Maya. She must have been sitting at a table near the back. She was running toward him, her beautiful white party dress flowing around her, the colorful beads in her braids clicking softly in the stunned silence. She didn't cry. She didn't scream. Her face was a mask of fierce, determined loyalty. She reached him and slipped her small, warm hand into his large one. She squeezed it hard. She looked up at him, her eyes clear and certain. She didn't say another word. She just held on. Marcus looked down at his daughter's hand in his. It was the only thing that mattered. He squeezed back, a silent promise. Together they turned and walked away, leaving the entire glittering, fraudulent world of the Carters frozen in a tableau of their own making, silent and exposed under the twinkling lights. The fallout was not a single explosion, but a cascade of consequences. each one a direct result of the truth Marcus had laid bare. The first shockwaves arrived, before he and Maya had even made it back to their house in Decatur. His phone began to vibrate incessantly. The first message was a text from Renee, sent at 8:25 p.m. Text: "Where are you going? Get back here right now. You have humiliated me." The second came 2 minutes later. Text: "Everyone is staring. My father is furious. You have ruined everything, everything." Marcus didn't reply. He put his phone on silent and focused on driving, his hand still holding Maya's. When they got home, he led her inside, made her a cup of warm milk, and tucked her into bed. She was quiet, but her eyes were full of questions he knew he would have to answer eventually. For now, he just kissed her forehead. "I love you, sweetie. Everything is going to be okay." Once she was asleep, he looked at his phone. 12 missed calls from Renee, 7 from her mother, 3 from her father, and a string of voicemails, each one more frantic than the last. He listened to them, one by one, a grim catalog of a world collapsing. Voicemail 1. Renee, 8:41 p.m. Angry, incredulous. "Marcus, I cannot believe you. I cannot believe what you just did. To my family, to me, at my parents' anniversary party. You call me back this instant. This is not over." Voicemail 2. Renee, 9:15 p.m. Shifting to justification. "Okay, look, I know you've been upset. I know. But this was insane. All that money. That's just what family does. You don't understand. You're making it sound so transactional. It wasn't like that. You need to come back and apologize." Voicemail 3. Eleanor, 9:32 p.m. Hysterical. "Marcus, this is Eleanor. What have you done? People are leaving. They're whispering. William." William is beside himself. "You have brought such shame on this family. After everything we've done for you." Voicemail 4. Renee, 10:50 p.m. Pleading, cracking. "Baby, please call me. I'm home. The house is so empty. Where are you? We can fix this. I know I could have been a better wife. We can talk about it. Just please come home. Don't do this to us. Don't do this to Maya." Voicemail 5. Renee, 1:17 a.m. Sobbing. "Marcus, I'm so sorry, okay? I'm sorry. I never meant to make you feel that way. I love you. Please, I love you. Don't throw away 12 years. Please, just pick up the phone." He deleted them all. The next morning, Alana James filed for legal separation on his behalf, citing irreconcilable differences and financial malfeasance. The consequences for the Carters were swift and brutal. First, the social collapse. The story of the ledger reading spread like wildfire through their elite social circle. Marcus wasn't painted as the villain. He was the wronged party. The Carters were unmasked as frauds, users who had financed their lavish lifestyle on the back of their working-class son-in-law. The invitations to galas and charity events dried up overnight. Old friends suddenly became unavailable for lunch. The whispers followed them everywhere they went. Second, the financial ruin. With Marcus's income stream severed, the delicate house of cards collapsed. The anniversary party, with its $15,000 catering bill and $5,000 string quartet, went onto William's credit card. Within 2 months, the property taxes on the guest house went unpaid, and a lien was placed on the estate. Kevin's can't-miss stock tip had predictably been a bust, and with no more loans from Marcus, his creditors came calling. His leased condo was lost, and he was forced to move back in with his parents. For Renee, the fall was the hardest. The joint account was frozen by the court. She had no income, no savings of her own, and a lifestyle that cost upwards of $10,000 a month to maintain. Within 3 months, she had to sell her beloved white BMW 3 Series, getting only $28,000 for it, most of which went to pay off the credit card debt she'd accrued. She was forced to leave the house in Decatur, the house Marcus had paid for, and was now awarded in the separation agreement, and move into a cramped $1,500 a month apartment in a charmless complex in Sandy Springs. She tried to find a job, but her resume had a 12-year gap. Her entitled attitude and lack of recent skills made her unemployable in the marketing field she'd left behind. She ended up taking a position as a receptionist at a dental office for $17 an hour. The woman who once wore $2,400 dresses was now answering phones and scheduling appointments, her face a constant mask of bitter resentment. The luxury she had believed was her birthright was gone, and in its place was the harsh, unforgiving reality of a life she had to pay for herself. 2 years passed. The world turned, and life, as it always does, found a new rhythm. It was a bright, crisp Saturday morning in October. In the clean, organized two-car garage of a modest but comfortable rented house in a quiet Decatur neighborhood, the air smelled of machine oil and potential. The garage had been converted into a workshop and classroom. A large sign on the wall, professionally painted, read, Ellison HVAC, Training and Service. Marcus, now 46, stood before a disassembled condensing unit. His hair had a few more distinguished threads of gray at the temples, but the tired, strained lines around his eyes were gone. He looked peaceful. He was explaining the function of a dual-run capacitor to 2 young men in their early 20s, both of them black, both listening with rapt attention. "See, the key is to always discharge it before you handle it," Marcus said, his voice patient and clear. "This little thing can hold a serious charge. Safety first, always." He had started the service 6 months after the separation, using a small business loan he'd easily secured with his perfect credit history. He specialized in honest, reliable repairs, but his real passion was the training program. He took on 2 apprentices each year, usually young men from the community who needed a skill and a mentor. He taught them the trade, but he also taught them about business ethics, about valuing their labor, about self-respect. He was building something, not just fixing things. The side door to the garage opened, and Maya walked in, now a confident and happy 12-year-old. Her hair was in long, neat twists that fell past her shoulders. She was carrying a plastic tray with 3 glasses of lemonade and a plate of cookies. "Break time, Daddy," she announced, her voice bright. The 2 apprentices, Jamal and David, grinned. "Thanks, Maya. You're a lifesaver." As they took their break, Maya pulled a folded piece of paper from her pocket and handed it to Marcus. "I made this for you, for the wall." He unfolded it. It was a drawing, done in colored pencils. On one side stood a tall figure with a kind smile, holding a wrench. On the other stood a smaller figure with long twists, holding a book. Above them, the sun was shining. He recognized his own steady hands, her brilliant smile. "It's beautiful, sweetie," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "Who is it?" "That's you, Daddy," she said, pointing. "You're a teacher, and that's me. I'm going to be a lawyer, like Mrs. James." She looked up at him, her dark eyes shining with pride. "We're a family." She then pointed to the figures, to the rich brown color she had carefully used for their skin. "We're black, and we're happy," she said, as if stating the most obvious and wonderful fact in the world. A single tear escaped Marcus's eye, a tear not of sorrow, but of overwhelming gratitude. He hugged her tightly. "Yes, we are, baby girl. Yes, we are." Later, he tacked the drawing to the main wall of the workshop, right next to his business license and his first dollar earned. He looked at it. This simple, powerful declaration of their new life. He realized that for 12 years he had been pouring his life's energy into a foundation made of sand, trying to earn a place at a table where he was never truly welcome. He had mistaken their luxury for value, their status for worth. True wealth, he now understood, wasn't in a Buckhead estate or a $43,000 car. It wasn't in a name or a legacy built on the silent contributions of others. True wealth was in the solid feel of a tool in your hand, in the respect you earn through your own hard work. It was in the quiet pride of teaching a young person a trade, in building a community, not just a bank account. It was in the unconditional love of a child who saw you not for what you could provide, but for who you were. It was the peace of a Saturday morning, the taste of lemonade, and the simple, profound knowledge that his smile now, finally, reached his eyes. He was no longer invisible. He was seen. He was home. What does it mean to build a life of true value? Share your thoughts with our community in the comments. We believe stories like Marcus's show us that real strength isn't about enduring disrespect, but about having the courage to demand your worth and build a new foundation based on love and respect. Thank you for being a part of our channel.